Richard and Tina Satchwell's story began like many others. They met in the UK, forming a bond that would eventually lead to marriage. Born in Fermoy, County Cork, Ireland, Tina relocated to England in her younger years. There she met Richard, and the two began a relationship that would span over 2 decades. They seemed, to outsiders at least, like a quiet, loving couple. Eventually they moved to Ireland and settled in Ewell, County Cork, a coastal town that offered a peaceful life. There, they lived in a modest home, keeping largely to themselves. Tina was described by her family as bubbly and warm-hearted, with a great love for animals. She was known to take in stray cats and care deeply for their well-being. Richard was more reserved, but worked steadily and maintained a routine life with Tina. However, behind closed doors, there were tensions. Tina's family later recalled how she had started to distance herself from them. Communication became sparse, and there were signs that not all was well in the Satchwell household. While they were married for nearly 25 years, friends and family described the relationship as increasingly strained in its final years. Tina's sister, Teresa Dingivan, spoke about how Tina had become more withdrawn and seemed to be isolating herself. There were concerns about control in the relationship, with Tina often reluctant to talk openly. Despite these concerns, Tina remained in the marriage, and little action was taken until it was too late. On March 20, 2017, Richard Satchwell reported his wife missing. He told the Irish police that Tina had gone shopping 2 days earlier and never returned. According to Richard, she had left the house while he was out running errands, and when he came home, she was gone. Her suitcase and some belongings were missing. Initially, there were no major red flags. People do go missing, and occasionally, voluntarily. Richard claimed Tina had mental health issues and had taken time away before, including a previous instance in 2016 when she briefly stayed in a hotel without informing anyone. He suggested she may have done the same again, but Tina's family and friends were immediately suspicious. Her sudden disappearance didn't align with her usual behavior. She had left behind her beloved pets and hadn't contacted anyone. Her passport remained in the house, and there was no record of her using her bank cards or phone after she vanished. Her sister became vocal in the media, pleading for answers and insisting that Tina would never simply walk away without contacting someone. For years, the case remained cold. Despite media coverage and national attention, no significant leads emerged. The guards conducted searches and followed up on tips, but nothing concrete surfaced. Richard made several media appearances, insisting he was innocent and that he believed Tina had left of her own accord. In those appearances, Richard maintained that Tina had likely gone away to clear her head, claiming that she had done similar things in the past. But the inconsistencies in his story began to raise suspicions. Observers noted how little he seemed to know about her supposed plans and how vague he was when questioned about her state of mind. As the years passed, suspicion surrounding Richard Satchwell grew. While no direct evidence initially linked him to foul play, public opinion began to shift. In interviews, his behavior raised eyebrows. He often seemed defensive and inconsistent in recounting events from the day Tina went missing. At times, he spoke about Tina in the past tense, further fueling speculation. True crime forums and social media users began scrutinizing every detail of the case. Many pointed out the lack of urgency in Richard's actions after Tina disappeared. He didn't notify her family for days, and he delayed reporting her missing to the authorities. He also refused to allow guards to examine his home thoroughly early in the investigation. Despite the mounting scrutiny, authorities could not move forward without evidence. They continued conducting periodic searches, including checking wooded areas and properties nearby. Tina's family remained vocal, keeping her name in the news and pressuring authorities to dig deeper. Journalists, too, began re-examining the timeline of Tina's disappearance, finding gaps and contradictions in Richard's story. Why had he waited 2 days to report her missing? Why had he assumed she was simply off clearing her head? And why didn't he alert Tina's family sooner? These questions lingered in the public's mind. In September 2023, over 6 years after Tina vanished, the case saw a stunning breakthrough. guards launched a detailed search at the Satchwell residence in Youghal. This renewed investigation was the result of new intelligence received by the authorities, though details of that tip have not been disclosed publicly. During the extensive search, investigators made a grim discovery: human remains buried beneath the concrete floor of a walled-up alcove in the house. The remains were sent for DNA analysis, and days later, it was confirmed. They belonged to Tina Satchwell. The revelation shocked the country and confirmed the worst fears of Tina's family. The home where Richard had continued to live for years had concealed the truth all along. Almost immediately, guards arrested Richard Satchwell. He was charged with the murder of his wife, and within hours of the remains being identified, he was brought before the courts. Neighbors expressed disbelief that something so horrific had happened just doors away. Many remembered Tina as friendly and kind, and the idea that she had been buried beneath her own home was deeply disturbing. Richard's arrest made headlines across Ireland. After years of mystery, the case had moved from speculation to hard evidence. At his first court appearance, he remained mostly silent, showing little emotion as the charges were read. The public reaction was intense. There was a wave of sympathy for Tina's family, who had spent years searching for answers, and a renewed sense of urgency around cases of missing women in Ireland. The media delved into Richard's background, reviewing his interviews and highlighting inconsistencies that had been overlooked or dismissed. In custody, Richard Satchwell was placed on suicide watch. Reports indicated that he was under strict observation as he awaited further legal proceedings. Meanwhile, guards continued their investigation, looking for any other evidence to strengthen the case. Activists and women's rights groups began using Tina's case as a rallying cry, emphasizing the need to take all disappearances seriously, particularly when there is any suspicion of domestic abuse. The case became a national conversation on coercive control and the dangers women can face in their own homes. Richard Satchwell's trial began in early 2024 at the Central Criminal Court in Dublin. The prosecution laid out a harrowing timeline, arguing that Richard had killed Tina during a domestic dispute and hidden her body in the family home. The court heard that Tina had been planning to leave him and that the couple had a volatile relationship. Prosecutors emphasized the deceptive efforts to conceal her remains, including pouring concrete over the area and building a false wall. Expert witnesses testified about the efforts made to hide the body and the likelihood that the murder was premeditated, or, at minimum, the concealment intentional. The defense claimed there was no conclusive evidence of premeditation and that the death may have occurred during a sudden argument. They argued for leniency, suggesting emotional distress on Richard's part. However, the weight of evidence was damning. Key testimony included forensic experts and statements from Tina's relatives about the emotional and psychological abuse they believed she endured. The court heard how she had confided in family members that she was unhappy and considering leaving Richard. Journalists covered the trial extensively. Public galleries were full, and the public followed every update with bated breath. Tina's family, sitting through each painful session, showed courage as the grim details of Tina's final moments were laid bare. In April 2024, Richard Satchwell was found guilty of the murder of Tina Satchwell. The courtroom was silent as the verdict was read. Richard showed little visible reaction, but Tina's family wept quietly in their seats. The judge commended the guards for their persistent investigation and condemned the cruelty of Tina's murder and the subsequent deception. Richard was sentenced to life imprisonment, the mandatory term for murder under Irish law. For Tina's family, the verdict brought a measure of closure after 7 years of anguish. Her sister, Teresa, spoke publicly after the trial, thanking the guards and the public for their support, but emphasizing the enduring pain of losing Tina in such a brutal way. The country collectively mourned the loss of a woman who, though she had been missing for years, had never been forgotten. The guilty verdict brought a sense of justice, but it also underscored how long the truth had remained buried. Tina Satchwell's case reignited national conversations about domestic abuse, missing persons, and the systems in place to investigate disappearances. Advocates called for stronger protections for women in volatile relationships and more robust missing person protocols. The case is now frequently cited in discussions around coercive control and the signs of hidden abuse that often go unnoticed. Tina's name has become symbolic of the many women whose disappearances remain unresolved. In Yogal, locals still speak of the tragedy with a mix of shock and sorrow. The house where Tina was found has since been vacated and boarded up. It stands as a quiet reminder of the darkness that can hide in plain sight. The government has faced pressure to increase funding for domestic violence services, introduce mandatory coercive control training for gardaí, and improve inter-agency cooperation when adults go missing. Tina Satchwell's story is one of love, fear, loss, and justice. For years, her voice was silenced, first by disappearance, then by secrecy. But through the determination of her family and the dogged efforts of investigators, the truth was eventually brought to light. While no verdict can bring Tina back, the trial's outcome affirmed the truth. She did not vanish voluntarily. She was taken, and now her story stands as a solemn reminder of how even the quietest lives can conceal unbearable suffering, and how justice, even when long delayed, can still prevail. Her memory lives on, not just in the hearts of those who loved her, but in every step society takes to protect the vulnerable, to listen more carefully, and to act more swiftly when someone disappears. That is it for today's video. What is your thoughts on our story? And leave a comment below, and I will see you next time.